Good evening. Can we turn it up a little bit without killing everyone in here? Is that better? How's the audio level? Can you guys hear everybody? Okay, perfect. Hello and welcome to STEAM Cafe. My name is Angela Metler. I am an administrative assistant in the president's office at South Dakota Mines, and I am really glad you guys are all here. We've got a great turnout tonight. Thank you for coming. This is being broadcast live on Zoom, so thank you to those of you on Zoom who are attending virtually. At the end of the presentation, there will be a time for questions for the presenter. That also goes for those of you who are attending on Zoom. If you have a question, please type your question into the chat box or the Q&A box, and I will ask it and it will get answered live. STEAM Cafe happens every third Tuesday, and it's a partnership with Haycam Brewing and South Dakota Public Broadcasting. We couldn't do it without them, and we couldn't do it without you. So again, thank you so much for coming tonight. There are some extra chairs down here if you need them, and I can grab a couple of tall ones out of the storage closet here in a second. I would like to introduce tonight's presenter, Mike Headley. He is the SURF Lab Director and the Executive Director of the South Dakota Science and Technology Authority.
All right. I think does it sound okay? Yeah. All right, cool. Well, thank you for having me. I have my boss sitting over here by the wall. The president of the university, he's going to be gone soon. So, really, Jim, really have appreciated working with you and everybody at Mines over the years. And I know Casey would agree. We've really enjoyed having you as part of our board, and we're sad to see you go. All right, let's go to the next slide. So we're going to spend this evening. We're going to start out with a little bit of intro on SURF. I know we've got some folks that this may be kind of a new topic, to give you a little bit of background on why we go deep underground to do this work. Hey, Mike, can you guys? All right. Woo. So a little bit of background on me. I grew up in South Dakota, in Brookings. Please don't hold that against me. I've lived here almost as long as I did East River before I left for jobs on the coast before coming back. But I've done this kind of work for over 30 years now, and every time I say that, I'm reminded that I think I'm officially an old guy at this point, but have really had the pleasure of working in a lot of different management roles. I started out in the Air Force, got out, I worked for the U.S. Geological Survey at the Aeros Data Center north of Sioux Falls, and then kind of mind-blowing for me that I've been here for 15 years, and we've got a number of people from SURF here in the crowd. Really have had the pleasure to work with really a tremendous team, trying to make all this science happen and do it right here in South Dakota. Next slide. All right, so a little bit of an overview on SURF. We're really about two things: doing the world's best underground science and sharing the knowledge of that with learners of all ages across all generations. And so, and then our vision is really when scientists are thinking about mounting an experiment deep underground somewhere, we want to be first on their list. We want the best science coming here to SURF and being able to host the best science. So I'm going to use a couple of terms tonight. SURF is the actual facility. This is the laboratory. And then the South Dakota Science and Technology Authority, we're basically the owner-operator. And so we make sure that the facility is safe and that the science can come, get installed safely underground, and do their work. So we currently have about 200 staff members that are part of the SDSTA. You're probably aware that we have a large neutrino experiment that we're building out with Fermilab currently. They recently had about another 200 staff members up at SURF. We're going through a transition right now. 3 years of excavation activities have been completed for the Long Baseline Neutrino Facility. And so we're now kind of in the transition from breaking of rock and pouring concrete to really kind of framing out the house, to now putting all the infrastructure into it, and along with that, installing the experiment that will operate, called the Deep Underground Neutrino Experiment. So I mentioned we're the owner-operator. We now have 32 different science groups that we're working with, kind of of various sizes. Some are quite large and some are just a handful of people. And our user base is now over 2,300 scientists from all over the world, over 30 countries. So I mentioned the LBNF Dune project. We support the construction for that. I'll talk more about that later and how that presents some pretty interesting challenges for us. And then I mentioned sharing the knowledge and the excitement of doing science a mile underground with learners of all ages. And so we've got a great STEM education program and also a public outreach program that we operate. So our funding, we get funding from various sources to do things for the science experiments and so forth, but really our main funding source is the U.S. Department of Energy. And so we have what's called a cooperative agreement. It's basically like a research grant with oversight. So we have some DOE people who come out and are served permanently, and they're kind of provide oversight to make sure that we're doing what we said we were going to do. And so we've actually been under that direct relationship with DOE now for almost 5 years, and we're expecting a renewal, another 5 years of that to happen by September, which is good because that's kind of when our current funding runs out. So having the next agreement in place to keep things going is super handy. All right, next slide. So a bit of an overview of our footprint. This is our surface footprint that you see here outlined in orange. And so 223 acres of surface rights donated by Homestake Barrick when they decided to cease mining operations here in the hills. And then we own the subsurface rights for a very large portion of what Homestake owns here in the hills. So if you looked at it in a map view, it would basically be about 7,700 acres that goes down. The actual excavated space goes down to about 8,000 feet deep that Homestake mined during their 130 years of mining. So we've got two main areas that we operate, the Ross Complex and the Yates. Each one of those has surface buildings and so forth, but the main feature is a shaft that goes down, in essence, a mile deep. And that's the way that we get in and out of the underground. We've got a visitor center. Please, if you're up in Lead, please stop by and spend a lot of money because the revenue is how we help pay to keep things going. But just a really lovely visitor center and a lot of great programs. So I think you'll really enjoy it. So the site was opened in July of '07 as a dedicated lab, and as I mentioned, operated under a contract with DOE. So yeah, let's keep going. Next one. All right, so why we go underground. And the reason we go underground to do this work, it varies by science discipline. And the physicists have a very specific reason. And what you're seeing here, this is an animation of cosmic radiation coming from space. And so as we're sitting here in this room, we're constantly being bombarded by cosmic radiation. And we don't even notice it, right? But if you tried to operate the physics experiments that we operate deep underground on the surface, this would be a tremendous noise source, so much so that the science could not be successfully performed. And so by going a mile underground, it lowers that background by about a factor of 10 million. So if you put out your hand here on the surface, you'd have about 3 cosmic rays go through your hand every second. If you did the same exercise at our main physics campus down on the 4850 level, you'd have to hold out your hand for a month before you had 1 go through your hand. So it doesn't block out everything, but that almost mile of overburden lowers the background radiation enough that the science can actually be performed. All right, next one. So as you can imagine, we're not the only show on the planet when it comes to doing science underground. We have a number of colleagues that have labs that have been operating for a long time. Some are fairly new, some are still in development. And the ones that you see in gray, kind of in the southern hemisphere, are primarily ones that are in development. And but we do have, not every one of these is kind of a direct competitor for us. Primarily, the main competitors for SURF are Snow Lab, which is an active nickel mine located up in Sudbury, Canada, about 6,500 feet deep, so a little bit deeper than we are. And then we go over to Europe, And we have LNGS, that is a deep underground lab located actually in a mountain over in Italy called the Gran Sasso Lab. And the really kind of the cool thing about Gran Sasso is you don't have to take a cage and get in a mine shaft to go a mile underground. It's kind of like an off-ramp on the interstate once you get into the mountain. And then CGPL, this is the Jinping National Lab located over in China. And you would obviously not be surprised that, like in a number of areas, China is investing heavily. They have recently opened up a fairly substantial lab space about 6,500 feet down, so about the same depth as Snow Lab up in Canada. And they too are, like all of us, are competing for the best science in the world. Next one. Can't break my habit of trying to click it on my own. So maybe just a little bit of a secret decoder ring on this slide. I'm going to move this down just a little bit. Woo. So this is showing you the relative kind of lab volume for each of these labs. So if we look at SURF, what we're operating today is this small blue dot in the middle, about 10,000 square feet. I talked about the LBNF Dune project. That adds the next ring. And then later in the talk, I'm going to chat for a moment about additional space that we're trying to add for future experiments beyond Dune. And so this is at about 4,850 feet. The Italians are a little bit shallower. The Japanese, I didn't mention them, but they're a big player in the neutrino research. And probably caused an international incident by leaving the Chinese's lab space off the chart. All right. And then we have Snow Lab up in Canada. So, got it. Sure. All right, let's go to the next slide. So I'm not going to get into the science program in great depth, and I know I have some colleagues from South Dakota Mines here in the physics department that are probably really disappointed that they're not going to watch a computer science project manager try and explain physics to them. But I wanted to kind of give you a broad brush of the science disciplines that we work within. Obviously physics, these are some of the larger experiments, and not only from what we're trying to put underground, but the infrastructure that's required to operate them is pretty intensive and tends to be some of the most expensive work that we do. So dark matter, there are a number of experiments around the world trying to figure out where is the 80% of the matter that we cannot, or we haven't been able to see so far, that really kind of contributes to the glue that keeps the universe from flying apart farther than it is. The Lux Zeppelin experiment that's located at SURF is the most sensitive dark matter experiment in the world. So they're kind of on a 5-year quest to try and see if they can actually directly detect a particle of dark matter and figure out what it's all about. We do a lot of work with neutrinos. The Majorana demonstrator experiment was a kind of a smaller experiment that is kind of coming to the end of its time at SURF, but they're working on the next generation at a different lab. And so the Majorana demonstrator includes pretty significant participation from professors and students at School of Mines. And the LBNF Dune experiment, we'll talk more about that in a little bit, but obviously kind of the anchor tenant of the mall. I used to say that LBNF Dune was the Macy's of the mall, and my wife told me I needed to pick a little higher class store. No offense to those who are Macy's shoppers, but so I guess we'll call it the Nordstroms of the mall. Biology, believe it or not, we do a ton of work with South Dakota universities and having biologists come out. And really what they're trying to do, they're not really concerned about cosmic rays, but they want to go deep underground and find some really interesting novel organisms that you can't find on the surface, including organisms that really only exist in rock that's under great pressure. And so some pretty interesting work here. And as I mentioned, a lot of South Dakota involvement here. And then geology, obviously, a lot of involvement with South Dakota Mines over the years in geology work. And for the last few years, really, the majority of that work has been focused on developing enhanced techniques for geothermal energy production. And I don't know if Dr. Bill Rogentine from Mines is here in the room tonight, but Bill has played a major role in geology research at SURF really since we started. He was one of the first researchers that we worked with. So multidisciplinary science program, and this is not the norm at all labs around the world. A lot of them focus strictly on physics. All right, next slide. So as we go down to the 4850 level, this is what we're operating and building right now. So the Davis campus, this was originally started back in the mid-1960s by a guy named Dr. Ray Davis. Did some of the earliest work studying neutrinos from the sun deep underground and actually won a Nobel Prize in 2002. And so when we reopened the site in the 2008-2009 timeframe, this was the first place we went to expand the lab space there for the Davis campus has held, and still does, our main dark matter experiment. It held a prior version of that too. And then the Majorana demonstrator neutrino study experiment. We have a partnership with BHSU. They do some work called low background counting. And so you can imagine, pretty much everything around us gives off some form of radiation. Bananas give off a lot of radiation. We give off a little bit of radiation. And the last thing you want to do is go to one of the quietest spots on the earth and drag a bunch of materials with you that are going to give off a lot of radiation and create noise for your detectors. And so we do this thing called low background counting, where we kind of study the various components that will go into the bigger experiments to understand, are they quiet enough to be able to perform the science? So we've done, as I mentioned, a lot of work with Black Hills State in that area. So LB&F Dune, you can kind of see in green here, should probably color this blue before too long. That space has been fully excavated. I'm going to show you some really great pictures here. But it gives you an idea of the scale from what we have recently excavated for LB&F versus the 10,000 square feet that we're operating over here. And then we have had some activities here in the Ross campus. Those were kind of mothballed while we were doing the excavation for LB&F Dune over the past 3 years. Next slide. I'm really jealous. I'm up here drinking water and you're all drinking beer. So just to get that out there. LB&F Dune, really an experiment that is being attempted on a planetary scale. This is the largest science experiment ever attempted on US soil. And so what we're trying to do, before I kind of start pointing at the diagram, is through studying neutrinos, really trying to figure out what happened at the earliest times when the universe was formed and what's happened after that. We don't really understand why we live in a universe that's dominated by matter. And the goal is to be able to try and understand that through studying neutrinos. So neutrinos are really kind of an interesting particle. As they fly through space, they transform from what we call flavor to another. And we know that there are 3 of them currently. There's research to see if there may be more. There's some experiments being done at Fermilab to figure out if there's a 4th type of neutrino. But Fermilab has a particle accelerator ring that produces the world's most intense beam of human-made neutrinos. And so if you're going to study neutrinos, what a great idea it is to actually be able to create them in a controlled environment at Fermilab and shoot them 800 miles through the Earth. There's no tunnel or anything. They're very weakly interacting, so they fly right through the rock and the soil between here and Batavia, Illinois. And we're expecting those neutrinos to go through that transformation of one type to another and be able to see those neutrinos interact with large liquid argon detectors. And I'm going to show you a video here that hopefully will help make this a little easier to understand than the orange box on the slide. But basically, watching the interaction of those neutrinos with liquid argon and reading out those signals to be able to figure out those big questions about how the universe is put together. So this is a large Department of Energy funded project, international by nature. And so there is the near site, which is near the beam in Chicago, and the far site, which is out here, far away from the beam. And so the collaboration includes, as you can see here, approaching 1,500 scientists, over 200 institutions, 30 countries. And so as I kind of mentioned a few moments ago, that we're going through this transition from excavating rock, where we had one contractor on site doing that work and they managed it all, to researchers from, not all at once, but 218 institutions who will be coming here to do their thing. So as you can kind of imagine, trying to keep track of where everybody's at and that they're doing their work safely is going to continue to get a more complicated thing for us. All right, Mike, let's go to the next one. So if we kind of zoom in, and I'll show a video here in a moment that hopefully will help even more. This is kind of a, zoom in on the LBNF Dune caverns. And so what has been excavated is all of these connecting tunnels that you see, these things. Here is the raw shaft that is the main access way for constructing LBNF Dune. And there are 2 detector halls that you see here that have been constructed. And those are 475 feet long, 92 feet tall, and 65 feet wide. So imagine kind of what looks like a loaf of bread carved out of rock, a mile underground, that's almost 500 feet length and 90 feet tall, and really just massive caverns. So you see one of the 4 dune detectors that's planned right here in this location. There'll be another one here, and then 2 more here long term. And then in the middle is what's called the Central Utility Cavern. And so we talk about liquid argon that's at basically 300 degrees below 0 Fahrenheit, has to be kept really cold, has to be kept really pure, and it takes a lot of equipment to do that, and that's what's in that middle cavern. All right, next one. So talked just a moment ago about the scale of these caverns, and so it really did take some of the largest mining equipment made in the world to do that. And to kind of keep the rock where it's supposed to be, we put in large, lengthy rock bolts. They're basically like a piece of rebar that gets glued into the rock to kind of pin all the big pieces together. And that's what's happening here. This is a 20-foot long rock bolt that's putting the bolts in the ceiling of these big caverns. And you can see here, for scale, this gives you an idea of how big this is. Here's the gentleman who's working on that. And the conveyance that we have to get things in and out of the underground at SURF is not huge. It's about 5 feet wide, about 12 feet long. And then the ceiling in the cage is what we call it, I think is probably on the order of about 10 feet up. And so a lot of this equipment is just simply too big to like slide in the cage and take it underground. So one of the main challenges that we have for the South Dakota Science and Tech Authority is working with the excavation contractor where they will take all this stuff apart, in some cases cutting the equipment apart to be able to fit it within the envelope that we have to be able to get it underground, and then pulling it out of the shaft and putting everything back together, doing the job, and then the reverse happens. And the reverse of bringing stuff up actually just happened. We've been working over the past few months to demobilize all that equipment. We originally planned to haul, let me back up a sec. So one of the things that we do if we can't fit it in the cage is we have to put lifting straps on it and tie it to the bottom of the cage and lower it very slowly. And if you can imagine, that's a pretty nerve-wracking thing to do. We call it a slung load, where you lower things down and then you grab onto the bottom and you pull it out on the 4850 when it gets down there. And so from worrying about things falling and insurance and that kind of thing, I like to think that not too much about we're doing this when we do it, because it's really stressful. And so if we go, anyhow, so the lowering of all this equipment and all the big stuff to build this, it really is like literally building a ship in a bottle where the neck of the bottle is a mile long. So it's just really amazing from a logistics perspective. And we originally, we laugh a little bit about this now, but when the project started, we were told, you'll have to do 20 of these. And so as the project excavation is finished, we've done over 400, because some of the things that were going to get put in the cage decided to get slung underneath the cage. So they're a pretty nerve-wracking operation. All right, next one. So this is one of the caverns. So if you kind of think back to that graphic a moment ago, it was the one that was furthest on the left, the one detector cavern. And so this is standing at one end at ground level where the cavern has been excavated. What you're seeing here, I mentioned all those rock bolts and mesh and everything. What got put over that was a 3 to 4 inch layer of what we call shotcrete, which is concrete sprayed on the walls and the ceiling. And then the beams that you see in the ceiling are for moving really heavy materials. So there'll be monorail cranes that are mounted to that will take the materials from one end of the cavern, be able to stage those so the detectors can be built. And obviously you can see the humans in the foreground here for scale. Next one. So going back up to the 4850 level, these are built kind of subterranean to the 4850 for the most part. And you're kind of viewing from the 4850 level down at both caverns. All right, next one. All right, we're going to take a look at a video that will show you the detector in the cavern. So to keep all this liquid argon cold, it has to be cooled, but it has to be in essence a highly insulated box. And so the technology that's used for this is the same thing that's used for liquefied natural gas storage. So a steel tank with a bunch of foam insulation and then a stainless steel corrugated liner that's on the inside that can expand and contract as the liquid inside gets warm or cold. So we'll go into the North Cavern and look at, here it is without one of the detectors in it. So the red pieces that you see are I-beam steel, and there's about 325 of them that have to be taken down. And in total, it's about 5 million pounds of steel for one of these that we have to deploy down the shaft and get into the cavern to be able to build this. There's some support equipment on the top, primarily data acquisition equipment, cryogenic equipment. So I think as these get built out, going into these caverns, I think they're going to feel a lot smaller than they are because of all of these large detectors that are going in them. And so we'll zoom inside the caverns. So they're instrumented with wire plane arrays and so forth to be able to detect the interaction of the neutrinos with the argon atoms. And when that interaction produces electrons that are the signal that the Dune experimenters are trying to read out. All right, let's go to the next one. So some of these large steel components have already showed up. And so what you're seeing down here, kind of a little hard to tell, but here's one leg of an L and here's the other leg. So in the corner of the cryostats, this is the corner piece. And then what stands on top of that when it stood up is this long piece right here that's approaching 40 feet in length. And so as you can imagine, trying to sling, pick up something that's L-shaped, and it's going to want to go like that, right? It's going to want to tip a little bit because of the weight hanging off it, is really awkward to be able to move. So we've been doing a lot of practicing and working on our rigging plans to do that. And this is one of the heaviest, longest pieces that we have to take down, which is it's somewhere north of 16,000 pounds. On the web of that beam is about 3 feet. So they're massive. So they showed up. We've been working with our Dune colleagues to do all the planning for getting all that work underground. So let's shift gears a little bit. For a number of years now, farther back than I know, maybe Jürgen can help me with this, but the particle physics community has gotten together about every 10 years to figure out what are they going to do next. And so that happened back in 2014, and what came next, in large part, were experiments and advancements at SURF that we've seen over the last decade. And so starting during COVID, which as you can imagine is really a lovely time to try and get a couple thousand scientists together to chat, it was kind of painful to facilitate that early communication as they got together to figure out, all right, here's what's happened over the last 10 years, what's coming next. And so, but they were able to get that done. And what came out of this is what's called the P5 report. And we have so many acronyms, it's just kind of crazy. But anyhow, so this is what's called the Particle Physics Projects Prioritization Panel Report, of the P5 report. And really what it's saying is this is the 10-year strategic plan for particle physics, which is in large part what we do at SURF with our physics experiments. And so Jarrett Heiss, Jarrett's on the road this week, but he and I spent, we were up at the University of Washington, which is, I mean, just a lovely, you know, Seattle is just a lovely town and so forth. But spent 13 weeks, or 13 days, excuse me, 13 days, not 13 weeks. Whew, that hurt. So 13 days, taking a look, or, you know, being a part of conversations with scientists about what will be built next. And so the things that came out of that were LBNF Dune Phase 1, which is the first 2 detectors, that was highly endorsed. And PIP2, that's basically an accelerator upgrade at Fermilab to produce more neutrinos for LBNF Dune. And the nice thing about this report is, compared to the previous report 10 years ago, is there were a lot of really great things that were said about SURF. And so, you know, DOE, the science community said, leverage what's happening there to build out even more space for science, and designate SURF as what's called a formal DOE user facility, which really kind of raises the stature of SURF within the overall national lab community. And so the recommendations going forward were, and you can see this here, with SURF, the US has created a premier underground laboratory, recommending LBNF 1 and 2. As I mentioned, our main dark matter experiment, the scientists want to build one after that, the next generation. It'll be interesting to see if they observe dark matter over the next few years, but there are plans and work to build something even bigger. And then funding an expansion at SURF, building out more space so that we can hold or host different types of science and larger experiments. I mentioned the Davis campus. Basically, we are not able to host kind of the next generation because it's just physically not big enough. We had to build out additional space that can accommodate that. So we, in this report, we were mentioned like over 24 times with really great response of, hey, the US now has a really amazing world-class underground facility. Let's make use of it. Let's exploit that capability and grow it to advance science here in the US. All right, Mike. So that's what we're doing. While we're building out one of the largest experiments ever constructed on US soil, we're kind of prepping for what comes next. And so Casey and I spent the majority of 2 winters ago in Pierre lobbying for some additional funding to be able to kind of build out the first chunk of that to position ourselves to build out more space in the future. And so this tunnel right here is, it doesn't look like anything special, but it is required for us to have the ventilation and the ability to get rock to the shaft to bring it up to the surface to build out additional caverns on the 4850. And those are sized based on discussions we've had with the future experiments that are going to be coming. So we're in construction for this right now. And actually, Casey and I were underground on May 15th. He had the pleasure of shooting off the first blast. It was really, I can see why mining engineers really like to blow stuff up. It was really fun. It was a really fun afternoon. But we are coming close to getting this portion completed. These shops are, this main one is about 100 feet in length. I'm going to say 12 or 13 feet in height, about 12 feet wide. And so those will support the construction here in the future. And they'll also, I think, in the future, will provide some space where we can have smaller experiments in that area as well, and they can take advantage of it. So we're doing this now with Tyson Mining. That'll be done in October. And then we're trying to get $100 million in private money to build out the space that you see here, and that would happen towards the end of this decade, kind of as the Dune project gets close to completing its assembly and filling with argon and going operational. All right, next one. This is like the Zoom dramatic pause. So this was the first shot that we did on May 15th. So this was the first shot of that first shop of the three, the smallest of the three. So you can see the rock face has been drilled out, and basically what the miners do is they drill out a pattern on the wall that probably has 35 to 45 holes in it, and then they load it all with ammonium nitrate and fuel oil, which is the main explosive, and then all the detonator cord is connected to it, and then we scurry off behind a blast door and set it off, and that shot, and this is really not a great picture of it, but that shot created the beginning of that shop 8 feet deep, 13 feet tall, 12 wide, 8 feet deep, and then and the way this process works is you drill out a round, you shoot it off, you get all the rock that's on the floor out of the way, you put in ground support to keep the rock where it is, and then you do the whole cycle over and over again until you're done, is kind of how it happens. All right, next one. We'll see if this works. This is a video our communications team took of a shot. I hope it works. So you're seeing kind of the initial blasting happen in the middle to create space for the rock that's going to come in from the outer holes. Yeah, it's a little slow. Well, if you really want to see it, we'll look at it on my computer over a beer after we're done. So our communications team, I think they're really having a great time blowing up GoPro cameras. So, because when you film one of these shots, you get one take, and then you have to go to Best Buy and get yet another camera. So we've been talking a lot about science and more space and everything, but something that's really been an incredibly part of our mission since we started over 15 plus years ago has been education and outreach. And this is something that when people like Senator Mike Rounds and Mr. Denny Sanford sat around the table and talked about what this lab could be, it wasn't just inviting the world's best science to come here, but we wanted our students to get unique experiences and be able to take advantage of the best and brightest minds from the world coming here to do this work. And so that's something that really has been incredibly important to us through the years. And I'm going to point out a couple of people. Nicole Reiner, she's standing in the back there, she's the director for this work. Deb Wolf was the director. She's now Nicole's boss. She's the director of culture and outreach. And so we have a really incredible, dedicated group of people. They're a small but mighty team that really have a huge impact in the state that I'll talk about here in the moment. So this kind of talks about the major areas of work we have. So we have teachers that go out and give presentations to students, and whether it's assemblies or within classes or whatever. And so we have a number of grade banded presentations that talk about the science that we're doing and really the excitement of what it's like to do science work and doing that a mile underground. We have 17 different curriculum units that are based on the latest generation, or the next generation science standards that teachers have to teach to be able to have their students graduate. And I think for those who live here in the state, we have a lot of really small school districts that in a lot of cases are probably not funded to be able to have these types of things purchased off the shelf from companies. And so we've developed these. We allow teachers to use these. We send them, and you can see, hopefully, all the materials they need and the lessons plans to be able to teach 5 to 15 hours of hands-on instruction. And those have been incredibly well received, as you can imagine. We do a lot of career exploration and development. We have interns up at the lab in a couple of different programs this summer. That's a lot of fun and a great opportunity for kids to experience that, primarily undergraduate students. And then this really didn't start or begin at the start of all of our E&O program as much as it is now, but I think we've kind of figured out that if we want to get our programs in front of more kids, we need to help our teachers advance their skills. And so we do quite a bit of work. This is kind of professional development season. We had, what, 30 or 35 teachers who were at the lab this last week for a great experience. And so let's go to the next one. I think we've got some numbers to talk about. So to give you an idea of the number of students that we've worked with here in the state, if there was a pre-COVID column here, it would tell you about 12,000 students per year. That was kind of our average. COVID happened, like everybody, we kind of regrouped and figured out, all right, how are we going to do our mission when we can't be in front of people directly? And then the last 3 years, we've worked with almost 20,000, 18,000, and almost 17,000 students again. So our numbers have gone up greatly. And so within South Dakota, there are about 120,000 students in K-12 STEM education, or K-12 education, excuse me. So it gives you an idea of the kind of the percentage of students that we're working with each year. So, and we generally work with about 400 teachers per year in professional development, and so about 2,000 people hours of professional development over this last year. So really impressive, Nicole. And Deb? All right, next one. So in addition to all this previous work and getting science up and going and building for the future, we have decided to build an institute for underground science at SURF. And there isn't a similar thing that exists anywhere in the world. And one of the things that as we've worked at the lab now for a few years and working with experimenters going underground, is there isn't a lot of intellectual community. And so that's really one of the goals. And I'm going to talk more about this in detail in a moment. But this is really an effort for us to, I would say, really round out the types of programming that we're providing, be able to host theorists who are figuring out where the field is going to go next, host collaboration meetings where scientists can come up in the beautiful Black Hills and talk about their work and where they're going. A lot of K-12 STEM education opportunities linked to the science. But this institute we launched back at Elevate back on December 14th, but it's really been something that's been in work for a number of years for us to figure out what is the scope of this thing, what does our science community want, and we've got that on paper and we rolled it out, and we've got a team that's developed a good, strong program to move forward. So I think the next slide is a video. It is. A little more.
From leading theoretical physics to biology to geology and other scientific disciplines. The Institute for Underground Science at SURF will be unique in the world. It will bring hundreds of leading researchers to the Black Hills for short and long-term programs with additional housing, offices, and facilities on site at SURF. This will extend the $2 billion impact SURF already has in this decade on the local and state economy. South Dakota can be a leader in this space by helping shape research happening around the world, bringing together scientists from institutions across the nation and around the globe. The Institute for Underground Science at SURF will also serve to inspire young people to pursue careers in STEM. Join us in building a one-of-a-kind institute that will shape the future of underground science and education for generations to come.
Okay, next one. So the long-term vision, I kind of talked about us going through a process to figure out where we really wanted to go with this, is really be a world-leading center for underground science collaboration, building and fostering intellectual community, provide a venue where things like the P5 discussions, those types of science community planning activities could happen, and providing vision and leadership. And I think we have kind of a unique advantage in this in that we're one of the few labs that's really doing a broad range of multidisciplinary research here at SURF. So a hub of information for underground science and world leadership in K-12 STEM education. So it's a pretty bold vision. All right, we're in the home stretch here, trust me. We're about done. So near-term programming, we're kind of at the head end of raising funding for the operations and for the realization of that facility that you saw in the video. But we've been really pushing kind of the boundaries on interactions that we've been having with the universities here in the state. We've worked a lot with Mines, had a very productive relationship, a lot with BH, had a very productive relationship, some with USD, and we want to strengthen those and grow those ones that I've already mentioned. But there are a lot of universities in the state where we think they're really all of them, where there is something that we can do with them in partnership to advance their offerings and strengthen what we're doing at SURF. So higher ed connections, trying to get the university professors out and so forth to have conversations with us, teacher workshops, deeper talks. If you're a fan of the deep talks lectures we've been having, we're now starting a series of science talks throughout the year. And so check out our website, sanfordlab.org, to see those. Davis Bocall Scholars Program, this is one of our unique internship programs. Set up, we have, over the next few weeks, 70 scientists, some of them are already here up in Lead talking about physics theory, who are coming to Lead to talk about where the field is going next and what's beyond the experiments that we've envisioned so far. And though, if you live here in the state, you probably heard that there was a quantum computing consortium or amongst a handful of the universities here in the state through funding through the legislature last session. And there are some advantages of doing quantum computing and quantum sensor research deep underground, so we want to get involved with that as well as part of a quantum partnership here in the state. Okay, next one. All right, so one more topic. I forgot we had this in here, but we just completed last fall a ethnobotanical garden called Shangleska Wakan, and it's the ethnobotanical garden at SURF, and so the centerpiece is a 50-foot medicine wheel, and with just a beautiful location around it. This is right near our administration building, but just a lovely site. And so the construction was completed this last fall. If we go to the next one, this last week we had 100 people up for activity. Well, it was planting. We worked with the Native Plants Initiative at SDSU to get native plants, and in the quadrants of the medicine wheel, we planted over 400 plants. And really, it was a cool day. I think in our wildest dreams, we were hoping we'd get close to 70, and we did a nose count, and it's like, wow, it's over 100. And so a lot of interest in this. If you're interested in seeing this, we're going to be offering tours at the Visitor Center on Tuesday and Thursday. And check out our website or call the Visitor Center if you'd like to be a part of that. All right, next one. I think the last one is Neutrino Day. So Neutrino Day is coming up. And so on July 13th, our one-day science festival up in Lead, please come on up. It is a blast. If you want to volunteer, that's even more of a blast. Go to neutrinoday.com, and there's a place where you can sign up. We'll give you a free t-shirt and some water and snacks. So it is a lot of fun. And I know we've got one last 30-second video. I'm not sure if it's going to work very well, but this is kind of a 30-second recap of last year's Neutrino Day to hopefully entice you to sign up and come join us. And it's an event for all ages. So if you're 55 years old like me, you'll come have a good time too, trust me. So with that, I think that's the end of my talk. Thank you so much for your patience. It's really an honor to do this work here in South Dakota, and happy to chat with you this evening. Maybe take 1 or 2 questions, Mike, or what do you think? Okay. Any questions at all? And we can certainly chat about questions while I have a beer too, so.
How do you balance the excavation and the tests that are going on? Does it probably go work well?
No, they really don't. Blowing up rock is really not, doesn't mesh well with world-class physics. We generally, in the areas where the blasting has happened, there are incredibly heavy-duty metal blast doors that are installed, and so when they get ready to shoot off a round, they close them, and the shot is done. We allow the space to air out, and then the rock is removed. But there's a lot of thought and study that goes into not only preventing like air overpressure, breaking stuff down the tunnel, or vibration that's going to cause something to come apart. So yeah, there's a lot of engineering that goes into that to make sure it can be done safely.
Are these some of the largest excavations ever created underground?
I don't believe so. There are like a lot of hydro type plants underground. They are amongst the biggest, I'll say it that way.
Was the material that was removed during the excavation assayed in the process?
Yeah, it was sampled during that period, and there's a reason that rock had never been broken before. It's in a formation called the Poor Man. So we really, I know Homestake looked there years ago to see if there was any gold in that area. Actually, the gold is further to the west in that area. So I always kind of joke, if anyone does find any gold, I'm probably going to be the last one to know. So carry it out. But all right, sounds good. I'll be around if you'd like to chat. Otherwise, thank you so much. Appreciate you coming out. Yep.
Just wanted to let everybody know, we do Steam Cafe every third Tuesday. So next month is July 16th. The talk is called The Dinosaur in My Beer, 250 million years of brewing history. It's Dr. Andy Fark, who is a Mines alum and a paleontologist, going to talk about the evolution of beer ingredients from the age of the dinosaurs forward. So it should be pretty entertaining. Hope to see you next month, July 16th. Thank you for coming.